Hey Southwest students, I'm going to go over with you your assignment for AMI Day 25. That's for Friday, April 24th for English and Social Studies. So just as a reminder, we are continuing our 2020 pandemic journal. And the first thing that we're going to do is see the ELA and Social Studies chunked articles at the bottom of this packet, and we're going to read section 6 of Article 1. So I believe that starts on either page 12 or page 13, but here it is. I have it highlighted in orange. It's called All Parties Feared the Spread of the Plague. At that time, there were not enough priests in churches for masses, services, prayers for dying, or funerals. The plague moved through Dorset Seaport, onto Devon, Somerset, and up to Bristol. So the people of Gloucester stopped people escaping from Bristol. They feared the breath of those who had lived among the dying would spread the sickness. But in the end, Gloucester, and then Oxford and London too, and finally the whole of England were so violently attacked that almost 90% of both men and women died. Cases in the courts of the king came to a stop, for all parties feared the spread of the plague. When the churchyards were not large enough to bury the dead, fields were used for the burials of the dead. Hardly anyone dared to have anything to do with the sick. They fled from the things left by the dead, which had once been precious but were now poisonous to health. People who one day had been full of happiness on the next were found dead. Victims had little black boils scattered over their whole body. Of these people, very few, indeed hardly any, recovered life and health. The plague, which began in Bristol on the feast of the Assumption of the Virgin, which is August 15th, and in London around Michaelmas, 29th of September, raged for more than a year in England and completely emptied many villages. In the following year, it laid waste to the Welsh and English in Wales, and then it moved to Ireland, where the English residents were cut down in great numbers. But the native Irish living in the mountains and uplands were scarcely touched until 1357, when it took them unawares and killed them too. So again, one of the questions you're going to answer is off to the right here, but we're going to just skip it for now because we'll see it again in another area of the packet. So if you go back up to your assignment, now that we've read that, here's the 3 questions that you're going to answer in a Google form in your social studies classroom. The first thing you're going to answer is, do you see any examples of racism, injustice, or inequality in any of the events that happened today? Alternatively, do you see any examples of equality, fairness, or respect? That could be locally, at the state level, nationally, or the world even. So your answer might start with, an example of blank is blank. Or to be a little more clear, you might say, one example of racism or injustice or inequality locally or at the state level or nationally or in the world is blank. An example of equality, fairness, respect, locally or at the state level or nationally or in the world is blank. So you're looking at how certain groups of people are mistreated because of this and how others might be treated well because of this. The second question you're going to answer says, after reading the chunk of the article, consider the following question. Did the Black Death spread to other countries faster or slower than COVID-19? Underline textual evidence that helped you reach your conclusion. Explain some of the different ways that coronavirus has affected behaviors. So your response might say something like, I believe the Black Death spread either faster or slower than COVID-19 because blank. Some ways the coronavirus has affected behaviors are blank. And there's plenty of things you could put in those blanks. The last part of your assignment for today is to complete your Venn diagram to analyze similarities and differences between the Black Death and COVID-19 outbreaks. You're going to use evidence from the article and your journal, aka whatever notes you took, to support your work. So now that we've read the chunked assignment and gone over the questions, you're going to visit your Social Studies Google Classroom, where you'll find another Google form called AMI Day 25 Activity. Again, as a reminder, you're going to find this in your social studies classroom. You're going to complete it through your social studies classroom. You will get a copy emailed to yourself. And then in caps here, you see you will have to send a copy of your responses to your English teacher. So those of you that have got it down, you'll keep doing what you're doing. If you're confused, there's a separate video posted in our Google Classrooms explaining how to forward that email to your English teacher. But it shouldn't take you more than maybe even 30 seconds. So here's your AMI Day 25 activity. You'll put your first and last name here. Again, here's just a quick project overview that we went over on the very first day, AMI Day 21. If you need to revisit that, you can, but it basically just tells you what we're doing over these past couple days and the next couple days as well. Here's that first question we talked about. You're going to answer it here. Do you see any examples of racism, injustice, or inequality in any of the events that happened today? That could be locally, at the state level, nationally, or the world. So you're going to type your answer here, and you might start it by saying one example of racism, injustice, inequality locally, at the state level, or nationally, or in the world is blank. I just typed in some letters because I don't want you to copy my answer. We want to hear your own individual thoughts. But go ahead and type your answer there to that. Any examples of racism or injustice you've seen? The next question that we went over, you're going to answer here. Alternatively, do you see any examples of equality, fairness, or respect? That could be locally, at the state level, nationally, or the world. Your answer might say something like an example of either equality or fairness or respect locally, at the state level, nationally, or in the world is blank. You'll type your answer right here. Share your genius thoughts with your teachers. Then your next question is that Article 1, Chunk 6, which is what we just read on the previous screen. It's attached here. It's also at the end of your packet. The first question about that is, did the Black Death spread to other countries faster or slower than COVID-19? Quote textual evidence that helped you reach your conclusion. That means use specific quotes from this chunk of text that help you prove your answer. So you might start by saying, I believe the Black Death spread faster or slower than COVID-19 because blank. And you're going to type your answer right there. The next question says, explain some of the different ways that coronavirus has affected the behaviors of people. So there's plenty of different things you could type here. Just note what you have seen and how it's affected people's behaviors. It could even be how it's affected you and your family. Another question that you're going to answer right here in this form is, what is a new similarity that you see in the plague and the COVID-19 outbreak? Use evidence from the article chunk to support your answer. So you might say, the plague and COVID-19 are similar because they both blank. And you're going to note what new similarities you've noticed between those two things here. Your last question says, what is a new difference that you see in the plague and the COVID-19 outbreak? Use evidence from the article chunk to support your answer. So you might say, the plague and COVID-19 are different because they blank. You're going to type your answer here. And as a reminder, these last two questions are questions referring to your Venn diagram. So unless specified by your teachers, you don't need to turn in anything else. However, all of these questions need to be answered and then submitted to both your social studies and English teacher in order to get credit. So to make sure you do that, you will press submit. You'll get a little notification that says, sorry, a little mess up there. You'll get a notification that says, send this form to your English teacher. Your school email will get an email with your responses. All you have to do is press forward on that email and type in your English teacher's email address so that they can see your answers as well. If you don't do this, you will not be able to get credit in your English class. If you're still confused on how to forward these responses to your English teacher, take a look at the video posted in our Google Classrooms so that you can see some instructions on how to do that. But if you already know how to do that, go ahead and forward it to your English teacher. This form automatically submits it to your social studies teacher and to yourself. You just have to make sure it gets to your English teacher. Keep up the good work. We miss you guys. Have a great weekend.